The academy stood like a shining monument at the center of the alien city. Its tall towers glowed with blue light, and its walls carried the symbols of many species who came here to study. Students from different planets filled the wide courtyards, their voices rising like a storm of noise. Some had wings, some had tails, and some carried the marks of strength their worlds had given them. Among them all, one small figure walked with her head lowered. Her name was Rena. She belonged to a gentle race known as the Rhinal. The Rhinal were not strong or tall. They had thin arms, soft voices, and large eyes that seemed too fragile for the harsh world around them. At home, her people valued patience and kindness. But here, at the academy, patience and kindness were seen as weakness. Rena clutched her study tablet to her chest as she made her way across the courtyard. She heard laughter behind her. It was the same group as always. A tall green-scaled boy named Vark walked with his gang. His wide grin showed sharp teeth, and his eyes burned with amusement every time he looked at her. "There she is," Vark said, his voice loud enough for everyone around to hear. "The tiny Rhinal who thinks she belongs here." Rena kept her eyes on the ground. She did not answer. She knew answering would only make things worse. Another girl, taller and with a crown of thin silver horns, joined the laughter. "Does your people teach you anything useful, Rena? Or do you only learn how to cry?" The crowd laughed again. Rena's face grew warm, but she said nothing. She walked faster, hoping to escape before they decided to follow her. The academy cafeteria was huge, with tables stretching across the hall like lines of marching soldiers. Bright screens showed food choices, and machines served dishes from 100 worlds. For most students, it was a place of chatter and comfort. For Rena, it was the hardest part of every day. She stood in line, her eyes fixed on the floor. When her turn came, she asked for the simplest meal she could afford. A plate of bread and fruit appeared on the tray. She carried it carefully, searching for a place to sit. Most tables were full, but not a single group welcomed her. She chose the corner of the hall, where shadows reached across the floor. She sat alone and tried to eat quickly. But peace never lasted long. Vark and his friends entered, their laughter loud and sharp. Students shifted to give them space, as if the hall itself bent to their presence. Vark's eyes swept the room until he saw her. A smile grew across his face. "There she is," he said again. His group followed him, their steps echoing against the metal floor. Rena tried to keep her head down, hoping they would ignore her. But Vark stopped right at her table. Eating alone again, he asked, "Do you even taste the food, or do you just swallow your sadness?" The others laughed. One of them, a broad-shouldered boy with heavy arms, leaned forward and tipped Rena's tray. Her bread and fruit tumbled to the ground. The hall grew quiet for a moment. Students at nearby tables watched with curiosity. None spoke, and none moved to help. Rena froze. She looked at the food on the floor, then at the faces around her. Vark's grin widened. "Go on," he said. "Pick it up. That is where you belong." The group surrounded her, their shadows falling over her seat. Rena's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, but the sound would not come. Slowly, she bent down. Her fingers shook as she reached for the fallen bread. The laughter grew louder. "Look at her," the silver-horned girl said. "The little Rhinal eating from the ground. Maybe we should give her scraps every day." Rena lifted the bread, dirt clinging to its surface. She tried to clean it with her sleeve, but her sleeve only smeared it. She felt tears pressing against her eyes, but she forced herself not to cry. If she cried, they would laugh even harder. She placed the bread in her mouth, swallowing quickly so she would not taste it. She picked up the fruit and did the same. Each movement felt heavy, as if the whole room pressed down on her shoulders. The crowd did not stop laughing. "See," Vark said. "This is what happens when the weak think they can stand among the strong." Rena finished the last of her food, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear, to vanish from the room, but her body remained stuck in the chair. She felt the eyes of dozens of students on her. None helped. None spoke for her. She was alone. The memory of her home rose in her mind. The gentle fields, the calm rivers, the warm voices of her people. At home, no one would treat her like this. At home, she had friends who valued her kindness. But the academy was far from home, and the academy wanted only power. She stood slowly, her body shaking. Vark and his friends moved aside, still laughing. She walked to the machine to return her empty tray. Her steps were heavy, as if each one carried the weight of shame. No one spoke to her as she left the hall. No one met her eyes. Outside, the sun of this world shone down, its light reflecting off the metal towers. Students walked past her, some in groups, some alone, but none cared for the Rhinal girl with tears hidden in her eyes. She found a quiet corner of the courtyard where no one would see her. She sat down and pulled her knees to her chest. Her chest hurt with the effort of holding back sobs. She pressed her face against her arms, trying to disappear. The voices of the bullies still rang in her ears. Weak. Crying. Eating from the floor. She could not escape those words. For a long time, she stayed there, hidden from the busy world of the academy. She wondered if she should leave. Maybe this place was not for her. Maybe her people did not belong here. Yet a small voice inside her whispered something else. You came here for a reason. You wanted to learn. You wanted to grow. Do not let them take that from you. The voice was small, but it gave her enough strength to lift her head. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve and looked at the towers rising above her. Somewhere inside those towers, knowledge waited. Somewhere inside, she might still find a place where she belonged. But as the day ended and the sky turned red, she knew one thing clearly. If nothing changed, she would face the same cruelty tomorrow. And the day after. And every day that followed. The academy was a place of strength, and strength was something she did not have. Not yet. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself. One day, they will see me. One day, I will not be weak. She did not know that her life was about to change. She did not know that tomorrow, a human would arrive at the academy. A human who would see her not as weak, not as small, but as someone worth standing beside. For now, she remained alone. But the first spark of hope had been lit in her heart. The next morning began like any other at the academy. The sun rose over the tall metal towers, casting long shadows across the training fields and study halls. Students gathered in groups, their voices filling the air like a storm. For them, it was an ordinary day. For Rena, it was another day she had to survive. She walked through the courtyard with her study tablet pressed against her chest. Her eyes stayed on the ground, her steps light and careful, as if she hoped to pass unseen. She had almost reached the lecture hall when a shout broke the air. There she is, Vark's voice rang out again. Rena froze. She did not want to look up, but her body trembled with the memory of yesterday. The bullies were coming closer. Students nearby slowed down, waiting to see what would happen. Vark's group surrounded her, tall figures casting shadows over her small frame. The silver-horned girl smirked. "Careful, Rena, you might drop your books like you dropped your food yesterday." The laughter cut into her chest like a blade. She wanted to vanish. She wanted to hide. But then, something unusual happened. A new voice spoke, calm and steady. "Why are you blocking her way?" The crowd turned to see the speaker. A young boy stood at the edge of the group. He was not tall, not covered in scales, horns, or fur. His skin was plain, his hair short, his eyes sharp and steady. He wore the simple uniform of a new student. He was human. The aliens stared at him with surprise. Few had ever seen a human in person, for humans rarely left their distant world. Rumors said they were weak, fragile, and unremarkable. Yet this boy stood with a calmness that unsettled the crowd. Vark frowned. "This is none of your business, human. Go back to where you came from." The boy stepped closer. His gaze never left Rena. "It becomes my business when I see someone being treated unfairly." The crowd murmured. Students whispered to each other. No one had ever spoken to Vark like that. Rena's heart pounded. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. No one had ever stood up for her. Why would this stranger do it now? Vark's grin returned, but it held a touch of unease. "You must be new here. Let me teach you something. This academy respects strength. If you protect the weak, you will become weak yourself." The human shook his head slowly. "That's not how strength works where I come from." The words carried through the courtyard like a spark of fire. Students leaned closer, eager to hear more. Vark narrowed his eyes. "And what do humans know of strength?" The human answered simply. "Enough to know that bullying someone smaller is not strength at all." Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then, laughter erupted from Vark's group. The silver-horned girl clapped her hands. "Listen to him. He thinks words are power." But the human did not look away. He held his ground. His voice remained calm, steady, and unshaken. Rena felt something stir in her chest. It was strange and unfamiliar, a warmth she had almost forgotten. Hope. The crowd soon scattered as the bell rang for class. Vark sneered at the human before walking away with his gang. "Enjoy your time here, human. It will not last long." When they were gone, the human turned back to Rena. His expression softened. "Are you all right?" She could not find her voice at first. No one had asked her that before. She nodded, her eyes wide. "My name is Mark," he said. "I'm new here. I didn't mean to make trouble, but I couldn't just stand by." Finally, Rena spoke, her voice trembling. "They will come after you now." Mark shrugged. "Let them. I don't care." Her eyes widened again. "Why? You don't even know me." He gave a small smile. "I don't need to know you to know that what they're doing is wrong." The words settled deep inside her. She did not know how to answer, so she only whispered, "Thank you." That day, they sat together in class. Mark listened carefully to the lessons, asking questions when he did not understand. He seemed curious about everything, his eyes bright with interest. Rena kept glancing at him, still unsure what to make of this human who dared to stand against Vark. At lunch, the cafeteria buzzed with whispers. News of the morning spread quickly. Students pointed at Mark, some with interest, others with mockery. Yet he walked calmly, carrying his tray with steady hands. He saw Rena sitting alone in her usual corner. Without hesitation, he walked over and sat across from her. "You don't have to sit here," Rena said softly. "Everyone will laugh at you." "Let them laugh," Mark replied. "Food tastes the same no matter where you sit." Rena stared at him, uncertain. Slowly, she began to eat. For the first time, someone sat with her without fear, without shame. The feeling was strange but comforting. Vark entered soon after, his eyes scanning the hall. When he saw Mark with Rena, his grin returned. He marched across the floor, his group close behind. "Enjoying your meal, human?" he asked loudly. Mark looked up, calm as ever. "Yes. Do you need something?" The silver-horned girl snorted. "He doesn't understand, Vark. He doesn't know his place." Vark leaned closer to Mark. "I will explain it to him. At this academy, respect is earned through strength. If you think you can protect the weak, prove it. Face me in the trial arena." Gasps spread across the hall. The trial arena was a place where disputes were settled through combat. Few students dared to enter against Vark, for his victories were many. Mark placed his spoon down. He studied Vark's face, then nodded once. "If that's how things are done here, then I accept." The hall exploded with noise. Students rushed to spread the news. A human challenging Vark? It was unthinkable. Yet it was happening. Rena's heart nearly stopped. She leaned across the table, her voice urgent. "You cannot fight him. He is too strong. He will crush you." Mark met her eyes. His gaze was calm, steady. "Maybe. But if I run from this, he will never stop. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone." Rena shook her head. "Humans are not built for this. He will hurt you." Mark smiled gently. "Maybe I am not built for it. But where I come from, we don't measure strength only in muscle. We measure it in will. And my will says I won't let him treat you this way." Rena's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She wanted to argue, but the words caught in her throat. Vark laughed, clapping his hands together. "Good. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow, the human learns his place." He turned and left, his group following with loud laughter. The cafeteria buzzed with excitement, students whispering about the fight to come. Mark returned to his meal, calm as if nothing had happened. Rena could only stare at him, her heart racing with fear and something else she could not name. When the day ended, Rena found herself walking beside him toward the dorms. The sun set behind the towers, painting the sky with red and gold. "You should not have accepted," she whispered. Mark glanced at her. "I had to." "You will lose." "Maybe," he admitted. "But even if I lose, they will see that a human does not bend so easily." His words lingered in her mind long after they parted ways. Alone in her small dorm room, Rena sat on her bed, staring at the walls. Tomorrow, the human would face Vark. Tomorrow, she might see the only person who had ever stood up for her get beaten down. Her hands trembled. She did not know what to do. She wanted to stop him, but she also wanted to believe him. For the first time in a long while, someone had given her a reason to hope. She lay down, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The whispers of the academy echoed in her mind. Weak. Crying. Eating from the floor. But another voice rose louder now. A human voice. Calm. Steady. Unshaken. Strength is not only muscle. Strength is will. The words burned bright inside her, and she held them close. Tomorrow would decide everything. The academy buzzed with energy the next morning. Whispers filled the halls, echoing across the tall glass corridors and wide courtyards. Word of the human who had accepted Vark's challenge had spread to every corner. Students from every species repeated the same question. Could a human really stand against one of the Academy's strongest fighters? For most, the answer was clear. Humans were not known for strength or speed. They were not known for armor, claws, or horns. Vark, on the other hand, had been trained since childhood. His body carried the marks of countless victories. He was the pride of his species, and he ruled the academy with confidence. In the training grounds, groups of students gathered, practicing their moves while whispering about the upcoming match. Some laughed at the thought of a human standing in the arena. Others felt a spark of curiosity. None had ever seen a human fight. Rena walked through the crowd with her head lowered. Her chest felt heavy with fear. Every corner of the academy carried reminders of what would happen today. She could hear Vark's name shouted in victory before the battle had even begun. She could hear laughter already prepared for Mark's defeat. She found herself at the edge of the courtyard, where Mark sat calmly beneath a tall tree. His uniform was plain, and his hands rested on his knees. He looked as though he were simply enjoying the morning sun, not preparing for a trial that might break him. Rena hesitated before walking closer. She lowered her voice. "Why are you so calm?" Mark opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "Because fear will not help me." "You do not understand," she said quickly. "Vark has beaten fighters twice your size. He will not go easy on you. He will hurt you." "I know," Mark said softly. "But that is not what matters." Rena stared at him, confused. "Then what matters?" "That someone finally stands up to him," Mark answered. "If I run, then nothing changes. If I fight, maybe things will be different." Her throat tightened. "Different? You cannot win." Mark chuckled gently. "Where I come from, people told us the same thing many times. They said humans could not survive the storms, could not climb the mountains, could not cross the oceans. But we did. Not because we were the strongest, but because we refused to stop trying." Rena's eyes widened. She had never heard words like these before. At the academy, strength was measured only by power, size, and victory. But this human spoke of something else, something invisible but stronger than she could imagine. "Do you not fear losing?" she whispered. "Of course I do," Mark admitted. "But fear does not decide who I am. My choices do." Rena could not answer. She sat beside him in silence, her mind heavy with worry and wonder. The morning passed slowly. As the hour of the trial drew closer, students poured into the great arena. It stood at the heart of the academy, a wide circle of stone and steel with seats rising high into the sky. Screens lit up with the names of the fighters. The crowd roared with excitement. Inside the waiting chamber, Mark tied the straps of his training gear. His hands were steady, his breath calm. He had no advanced armor, no shining weapons. Only simple gloves and light protection across his chest. A voice broke the silence. "You are foolish, human." Vark stood at the other side of the chamber, his scales gleaming under the light. His teeth flashed in a grin, and his powerful tail swayed behind him. He walked closer, each step echoing like thunder. "You think you are brave," Vark said, "but you are only a child playing in a world too large for you. When the battle begins, you will beg to leave. And I will not let you." Mark met his gaze without flinching. "We will see." Vark laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Enjoy your last moment of pride. Soon, you will crawl on the ground like the Rhinal girl you protect." Rena, standing near the door, felt her body tremble. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice would not come. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "Do not listen," he told her. She looked at him with wide eyes. "He will destroy you." Mark smiled. "Maybe. But even if he does, I will stand until I cannot anymore." The announcement called them to the arena. The crowd's roar shook the ground as the two fighters stepped into the circle. Rena sat at the edge of the seats, her hands gripping the rail tightly. The announcer's voice rose above the noise. "Today's trial will be between Vark of the Scaled Clans and Mark of Earth." The crowd cheered for Vark, chanting his name. Only a few voices wondered aloud about the human. Vark raised his arms, showing his claws and teeth. His supporters shouted louder. Mark stood quietly, his gaze steady, his hands relaxed at his sides. The match began. Vark charged forward with speed that shook the ground. His claws slashed through the air, aiming straight for Mark. The human stepped aside at the last second, his body moving with sharp precision. The crowd gasped. Vark turned quickly, striking again. This time, Mark ducked low, rolling across the floor before rising to his feet. His movements were smaller, faster, and more careful than his opponents. He was not fighting with brute strength. He was surviving with agility. "Stop running," Vark growled. He struck again, his claws scraping the stone floor as Mark dodged once more. The crowd grew restless. Some shouted for Vark to crush him. Others leaned forward with curiosity, wondering how long the human could keep avoiding. Rena's heart raced. Every move made her breath catch. She feared each strike would be the one that ended it. Yet Mark kept moving, never giving Vark the satisfaction of a direct hit. Minutes passed, and Vark's grin faded. Sweat glistened on his scales. His strike slowed slightly. His breathing grew heavier. Mark, though battered and scratched from near misses, still stood tall. He circled his opponent carefully, his eyes sharp. "You fight like a coward," Vark shouted. "I fight to endure," Mark replied. The words echoed across the arena, silencing many voices. Students exchanged looks. They had never heard such a response. Vark roared, charging once more. But this time, Mark did not dodge fully. He stepped aside and struck with a quick fist against Vark's ribs. It was not powerful, but it forced Vark to stumble. The crowd gasped again. Rena's eyes widened. She felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. The match continued, the tension growing thicker. Mark could not overpower Vark, but he could last. Every moment he remained standing was a victory of its own. As the sun lowered over the arena, the trial neared its climax. The crowd no longer laughed. They no longer mocked. They watched with awe. For the first time, Vark was not the only figure of strength in the arena. The human had shown another kind of power. A power that refused to break. And though the battle was not yet over, Rena knew something had already changed. The arena was silent for a heartbeat as the two fighters faced each other. The sun had climbed high, casting a sharp light over the circle of stone. The crowd's earlier murmurs and whispers turned into a tense silence. Every eye followed the human and the alien, waiting for the clash that would decide strength and courage. Vark flexed his claws, letting the crowd hear the sharp sound echo across the arena. His scales glimmered under the light. "This will be easy," he said, his voice filled with confidence. "I will teach you your place." Mark did not move immediately. He studied Vark carefully, his eyes scanning every muscle, every movement. He had no weapons, no armor beyond his light gear. He relied on something else entirely. Awareness. Intelligence. Heart. The first strike came suddenly. Vark lunged with terrifying speed, his claws aimed directly at Mark's chest. The crowd gasped as the human stepped lightly to the side, his body twisting to avoid the blow. The claws scraped the stone where he had been standing, sending sparks into the air. Vark struck again and again, each attack faster than the last. Mark dodged, rolled, and moved with agility that surprised everyone. He did not attack directly, but every movement made it clear he was alive, aware, and ready. Rena, sitting on the edge of the crowd, held her breath. Every strike brought her heart to her throat. She had feared the worst, yet here was the human, standing tall against one of the Academy's strongest. "You cannot last forever," Vark growled, sweat forming on his scales. "You are weak." Mark did not answer. He did not need to. His movements spoke louder than words. He observed Vark's rhythm, noticing the slight hesitation after every strike, the way his weight shifted before each lunge. He was looking for an opening. The crowd leaned forward. Students whispered in disbelief. How could a human move like this? How could he survive strikes meant to crush even the strongest of fighters? Vark's face turned red with anger. He swung high, aiming for Mark's head. Mark ducked, rolling across the floor with perfect timing. His back hit the stone lightly, and he sprang up, putting distance between himself and Vark. The alien roared and charged again, more aggressively. He lashed out with his tail, trying to knock Mark off balance. But Mark leaped over it, landing on his feet without faltering. Every movement was precise, calculated. Every dodge, every step, seemed to frustrate Vark more than anything else. Rena felt a thrill in her chest. She had never seen courage like this. The human did not rely on brute strength. He relied on speed, awareness, and determination. Each second he remained standing was a statement. Vark's attacks grew more furious. He was bigger, stronger, and more experienced. He tried to overwhelm Mark with sheer power. But Mark adapted, moving differently each time, never repeating the same pattern. He was like water flowing around a rock, always finding a path to safety. The crowd gasped as Mark, for the first time, struck. He did not punch with the force of a weapon, but he aimed at Vark's side with a quick, precise strike. The impact made Vark stumble slightly. The crowd fell silent. No human had ever done that before. Vark's eyes widened with shock. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His pride had not prepared him for this. The human had found a weakness not with power, but with intelligence. Mark did not stop. He circled Vark, keeping distance but staying alert. Every feint, every movement, taught the crowd something new. Strength was not only about muscle or size. Strength was about endurance, cleverness, and heart. Rena's hands trembled. She wanted to shout encouragement, but she could not find her voice. She watched as the battle continued, her heart swelling with awe. Vark roared, slashing wildly. Mark ducked and rolled, barely avoiding a strike that could have crushed him. He saw the opening he had been waiting for. With quick timing, he struck Vark's side again, this time causing him to stagger more noticeably. The crowd erupted with whispers of shock. Could the human actually win? Could a single human outlast one of the Academy's strongest fighters? Vark's anger grew. He roared again, swinging with all his might. Mark dodged, jumped, and pivoted. Each time Vark attacked, Mark adapted, using his agility and sharp reflexes to stay alive. His strategy was not to overpower, but to endure, to learn, and to wait for the right moment. Hours seemed to pass in moments. Sweat ran down Vark's scales, and his movements grew slower. Mark, too, was tired, but he did not falter. Every dodge, every step, every movement carried his determination. He was not fighting for glory. He was fighting to show courage and protect Rena. Vark lunged one final time, overestimating his strength. Mark sidestepped and, with a careful strike to Vark's side, forced him to stumble forward. The alien's claws scraped the ground, and he almost fell. The crowd gasped. Mark's chest heaved as he stood his ground. His eyes were steady, unwavering. Vark glared at him, frustration and disbelief written on every scale of his body. "You," Vark growled, "you are not supposed to survive this." Mark raised his chin. Survival is not about strength alone. It is about heart, determination, and never giving up. The crowd was silent. Students whispered to one another, amazed. They had never witnessed a human move with such skill, such precision, such courage. Even Vark's supporters could not deny it. Rena's eyes filled with tears. She had never felt pride like this before. She had never seen anyone, let alone a human, face impossible odds and refuse to break. Vark roared one last time, but it was different now. The roar carried exhaustion, frustration, and a hint of respect. He realized that brute strength alone could not win. Mark did not attack further. He did not need to. He had already proven his point. Strength was not only about muscle. Strength was about heart, determination, and the courage to fight for what is right. The arena fell into a stunned silence. Even Vark lowered his head slightly. He had not lost completely, but he had not won either. The human had survived, adapted, and refused to break. Rena could hardly breathe from the excitement. She stood slowly, clapping her hands. The crowd began to murmur in awe, some shouting encouragement, others whispering disbelief. Mark looked at Rena and smiled faintly. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. You did it? You didn't give up." "I promised I would stand for you," Mark said softly. "Even if the odds were against me." Vark, though defeated in pride, stepped back. His expression had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something new, respect. "You are different," he said quietly. "I have underestimated you." Mark nodded, offering no anger or boast. He had shown strength without cruelty, courage without pride, and heart without malice. Rena felt warmth fill her chest. For the first time in her life, she realized she was not alone. There was someone who would stand with her, someone who saw her worth, someone who would never let her feel small again. The trial had ended, but the lesson had just begun. The Academy had witnessed something extraordinary that day. A human had faced impossible odds and had not only survived, but had shown what true strength meant. As the crowd dispersed, students whispered among themselves. Humans are stronger than we thought. He did not use weapons, yet he survived. Perhaps strength is more than size. Rena followed Mark out of the arena. Her heart felt lighter than it had in months. I thought he would hurt you, she said softly. Mark shook his head. He tried, but I adapted. And now, perhaps, he understands a little more about strength. Rena smiled, feeling a spark of hope she had almost forgotten. The academy was harsh and cruel, but now she had someone who would face it with her. Someone who would never let her face the world alone again. For the first time, Rena believed that maybe, just maybe, things could change. And in that belief, she found courage of her own. The arena had emptied, leaving the sunlight to shine on the battle-scarred floor. Dust floated lazily in the air, and the echoes of the crowd's cheers and gasps lingered faintly in the stone walls. Rena sat at the edge of the stands, her hands shaking as she replayed the fight in her mind. Mark had stood against impossible odds and had refused to fall. He had shown strength that no one had expected, not with brute force, but with courage, intelligence, and determination. Rena took a deep breath. Her chest felt full of warmth and relief. She realized she had never felt this proud of anyone in her life. Not even of herself. She had always been small, quiet, and unnoticed. She had thought she had no place in the academy. But today, she had seen what it meant to truly stand for something. Mark walked down from the arena floor toward her. His chest heaved slightly from exhaustion, his clothes torn in a few places, but his eyes were steady, bright, and calm. He smiled at her. "Are you all right?" Rena blinked back tears. I think I am." You didn't give up." "No," Mark said softly. "I didn't. And neither should you." Rena shook her head, trying to absorb everything. I thought you would get hurt badly. I was so scared." "I know," Mark said gently. "But fear does not decide what we do. Courage does. You taught me that even by being here, by surviving, you are already brave." Rena's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever noticed her bravery. She felt something she had long forgotten, hope. The students who had gathered around the arena began to disperse, murmuring to one another. Whispers of surprise and admiration followed Mark wherever he walked. Humans were rare here. They were not known for their strength. Yet today, he had defied every expectation. Even Vark, the strongest and most arrogant fighter in the academy, had changed. He approached Mark slowly, his massive arms crossed, scales glistening with sweat. His face was serious, almost thoughtful. "You survived," Vark said quietly, more to himself than to Mark. "Not with strength like mine, but with something I did not understand before. You are different." Mark nodded calmly. "Thank you. I only wanted to show that strength is not only in size or power. Strength is in determination and courage." Vark looked away for a moment, then back at Mark. His voice softened. "Perhaps I underestimated humans. And perhaps I underestimated you. I see now that bravery can come in many forms." The word stunned Rena. Vark had never spoken without arrogance before. To hear him acknowledge someone else's courage was extraordinary. She felt a flicker of pride for Mark and for herself, too. She had stood in the shadows for so long, but now she realized that even small voices could be heard. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Rena followed Mark out of the arena. The sunlight warmed their faces, and the academy towers shone bright in the afternoon sky. You did more than survive, she said softly. You made them see something they could not understand before. Mark smiled faintly. We all have something to show, Rena. Some of us just need the chance to be seen. They walked together in silence for a moment. The noise of the academy faded behind them. Rena felt the weight of months of fear and humiliation lifting from her shoulders. She realized that for the first time, she was not alone. Someone had stood with her, not because it was easy, but because it was right. In the following days, the academy changed in small but noticeable ways. Students who had once ignored Rena began to nod to her in passing, some even smiling. Others whispered stories of the human who had faced Vark and refused to break. Humans, once seen as weak and fragile, became subjects of curiosity and respect. Rena herself felt different. She walked through the halls with her head held higher. She still knew fear, but now she knew courage as well. She could face the bullies and the mocking voices without collapsing inside. She had witnessed someone defy odds greater than herself, and she realized that she, too, could survive, endure, and grow stronger in her own way. Mark became something of a legend at the academy. Not for defeating Vark in the traditional sense, but for surviving and showing everyone a new way to fight and to live. Students approached him with questions, some asking for advice on how to train, others asking about life on his distant planet. He answered patiently, teaching them not only techniques but also principles, courage, determination, and the refusal to accept cruelty. Rena found herself sitting with him often, learning from his wisdom as much as from the lessons of her teachers. Together, they practiced agility drills, study strategies, and ways to face fear without surrendering. Slowly, Rena's confidence grew, and she began to stand up to the bullies in small ways. A word here, a careful action there, until one day, she no longer felt invisible in the halls. Vark, too, began to change. His arrogance faded slightly, replaced by a cautious respect. He still trained hard, still led the stronger students, but he no longer mocked those weaker than him openly. Even he seemed to learn that strength was more than muscle, that courage and intelligence could earn respect in ways brute force never could. One afternoon, Rena and Mark sat on the edge of the training field, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool and calm, filled with the quiet hum of the academy settling for the evening. I never thought someone would stand up for me, Rena admitted softly. Not like that. Not without expecting anything in return. Mark looked at her, smiling. Sometimes, standing up for someone is the right thing to do. It doesn't need reward. It only needs courage. Rena nodded, thinking about all the days she had hidden, all the moments she had wished someone would see her. Now, she understood. Courage could come from anyone, anywhere, even someone small and fragile like her. And help could arrive in the most unexpected ways, even from a human who had walked into her life and refused to leave her behind. The academy towers glowed in the fading light, their walls reflecting the last rays of the sun. Students moved across the courtyards, some chatting, others walking alone. The world felt vast, but for the first time, Rena felt ready to face it. Mark stood and offered her a hand. Come on, he said. We have training tomorrow. And more lessons. Life does not wait, even here. Rena took his hand, a smile spreading across her face. I'm ready. Together, they walked back toward the dorms, side by side. The academy no longer seemed like a place of fear and cruelty. It was a place of challenge, yes, but also a place where courage could be seen, where determination could be respected, and where someone small could grow into something strong. In the days that followed, Rena noticed more changes than she had expected. Students who had ignored her now asked for her help in small ways. They respected her because she had endured, because she had survived, and because she had learned to face the world with determination. Mark, always humble, never boasted. He simply continued to show courage, patience, and intelligence. Other humans arrived rarely, but the first one had changed how the academy saw them forever. He had shown that humans, though physically smaller, could have immense heart and resilience. Rena's confidence grew with each passing day. She trained harder, studied with focus, and began to speak up when others tried to bully her. She was still small, but she was no longer invisible. The same students who had forced her to eat from the floor months before now looked at her differently, seeing a spark of courage they had not noticed. One evening, as the stars began to appear over the academy towers, Rena sat with Mark again. She looked up at the sky, feeling a quiet peace inside her. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. For standing with me. For showing me that strength can be more than muscle." Mark smiled, his eyes reflecting the stars above. "You have your own strength, Rena. You always did. You just needed to see it for yourself." Her smile widened. "I think I do now." The academy had changed, not overnight, but slowly, day by day. Lessons had been learned. Strength had been redefined. Courage had been seen, not only in the human who stood against impossible odds, but in every student who dared to be brave in their own way. Rena knew there would still be challenges ahead. She knew that bullies would not disappear entirely. But she also knew that she was no longer alone. And with Mark beside her, she felt ready to face anything. The light from the towers reflected in her eyes, bright and steady. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she truly belonged. Not because she had been spared cruelty, but because she had faced it, endured it, and survived. And in that survival, she found something stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than the judgment of others. She found courage. Mark stood beside her, calm and steady as always. Together, they looked toward the future. The academy stretched wide before them, full of challenges, lessons, and opportunities. But for the first time, Rena did not feel small. She felt ready. She felt strong. And she knew, without a doubt, that no matter what came next, she would never face it alone again.